Greg Palast, our old friend of the show, gregpalast.com, one of America's best investigative journalists, and actually one of Britain's best investigative journalists, as most of his work that makes its way to television is published by the BBC. He also writes for The Observer, the British newspaper. Greg Palast, Palast.com, his website. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be with you, Thom.
Glad to have you, Greg.
Okay.
Greg, this whole immigration reform is just absolutely blowing up right now. And particularly since the signing by Governor Jan Brewer of Arizona of this bizarre law in Arizona, and 99 and 44/100% of the media are treating it as a "we hate brown people" kind of thing, or as a racial discrimination, or jobs, or it's the economy, or whatever. Your investigation, you and Bobby Kennedy did an investigation of this, though, that BBC is reporting and that you are reporting, which indicates that there is an entirely different agenda behind this, one that Governor Brewer has been up to for several years, back when she was the state attorney general or Secretary of State?
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State. And, lay this out for us, Greg Palast.
Okay, well, look, the media line is that there's some kind of teabagger uprising and they want to stop brown people at the border. Yeah, that's the excuse. But fear of brown people coming over the Rio Grande is been part of Arizona politics, since the conquistadors. So this is nothing new. But what is new, what's motivating Brewer now, is the elections. Okay, this woman, remember, by the way, she was never elected. When Janet Napolitano was appointed by Barack Obama to his cabinet, she popped up from Secretary of State. She knows the Republicans don't stand a chance with the new demographic wave in Arizona. You've got massive new registration by legal Hispanic voters. And Jan Brewer has been part of a campaign 4 years as Secretary of State to block and purge Hispanic voters. And I got to tell you, Catherine Harris would blush at her method. She blocked 100,000 voters from registering. It's just stunning. Right.
These are legal U.S. citizens who happened to have committed the crime of trying to vote while brown. The other thing that is worth noting here, Greg Palast, is that for the state of Arizona, this is nothing new or unique. William Rehnquist, the recently deceased former Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, in the 1960s, in the early 60s, made his mark in Republican politics and began his ascent to what ultimately led to his being Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court by standing at the polls and challenging Spanish-looking or Native American-looking voters and basically getting them bounced out of the polling stations in the 60s.
In fact, what they do is they threaten people. In fact, this law will go to the old Rehnquist method of threats, which is they go to people in line and they say, if you vote and you're not a citizen, you can't prove you're a citizen, we'll arrest you.
That's right. Now, and this is what Rehnquist was doing in Arizona, by the way.
And he was doing it in Arizona, but now they're making it the law, which is going to empower the cops, the Republican Party hacks, to get into, to basically continue to intimidate and harass the Hispanic voting community.
Oh, absolutely. And they don't even need to use the police. All the Republican Party has to do now is hire a rent-a-cop in a uniform that looks like it's a police uniform and have them stand in the voting lines and say, do you have your birth certificate? If not, I might take you to jail.
Well, in fact, of course, they can use their rent-a-cop is their cop, which is Joe Arpaio.
Yeah.
Now, he's the sheriff in Phoenix, which is Maricopa County.
Right.
This guy's already facing literally a possible federal indictment. He's being investigated by a grand jury for his racially biased practices. This is the guy that they are empowering to enforce a law where any cop under his command can stop anyone who he thinks is an illegal immigrant. And by the way, I went into his jail with no illegal immigrant signs. I was there. You'll see pictures of him if you go to gregpalast.com and his jail. He didn't stop me, the white guy, even though my grandmother snuck in illegally. I'm from an illegal
Nobody
family.
asked you for your birth certificate.
No one asked for my birth certificate. So you know what this is about. And like I say, when Jan Brewer was Secretary of State, she knocked off 1 out of 3 attempted registrants in Phoenix. Now,
a Democratic city.
In a Democratic city, almost all Democrats, almost all new Hispanic voters. on the grounds that they couldn't prove that they were citizens. Now, I have to tell you that voting, if you're registering to vote, if you're not a citizen, is a jail time crime. So I went to Brewer and her office in Arizona, and I said, wow, give me these fellows. We'll arrest them on camera because it's a crime.
Right.
And it should be easy to find them because when they register, Tom,
they give
their
address.
And addresses, exactly.
Right.
So give me the names. She didn't have one. Then I went to Senator Russell Pierce. He's the sponsor of the current law.
Right.
That this new show me your papers, Soviet style, Gestapo style, show me your papers stuff.
Right.
Okay, I went to Pierce. He said that there are 5 million illegally registered voters in the U.S., 5 million illegal aliens registered by the Democratic Party. So I said, okay, I don't need 5 million. Give me 5. Again, they give their names and addresses. He couldn't give me 5. But then I went to Joe Arpaio's prison, and I see what they've got in mind here, which is that it's not the crime of voting illegally or being here illegally. It's the crime of not having the papers. And they know who doesn't walk around with papers. Proof of citizenship, only 1 in 6 Americans even has a passport. How do you prove you're a citizen? Could you prove you're a citizen right now if someone stopped you, Tom? I couldn't.
Well, and this is where it gets into bizarre land, Greg Palast, is for example, the original birth certificate that the birthers are demanding of President Obama. I know, one of my kids needed to renew her passport recently, and Louise and I had given her birth certificate back when she was in her early 20s. She's still in her 20s, but back 5-6 years ago, and she's lost it somehow. She had to reapply to the state where she was born to get it. She's got a copy, just like the copy that Obama has, given to NBC News, and they posted from the state of Hawaii. I would guess, Greg, that probably 10, 20, 30, maybe even as much as 40 or 50% of actual American citizens don't have their original birth certificate. And then you've got birth certificates issued by different counties, different different places all over the country. And if somebody's in line and the rent-a-cop comes up and says, to vote, and the rent-a-cop says, show me your birth certificate, and they pull something out and he looks at it and says, I don't think this is acceptable. I'm still going to challenge you. I mean, even that might not be enough. Greg, we have about 30 seconds here for you to wrap this up. This is about voter suppression more than anything else.
It's the color of the voters that are going to be stopped. That is Democratic blue. Thom, Hartmann, Greg Palast, the white guys aren't going to be stopped. You know who's going to be stopped, and that's the history in Arizona.
Yeah, and
check out the story.
And that's what Jan Brewer is doing, and that's what she was doing before. And what was Obama thinking when he made her governor? I guess he really wanted Janet Napolitano at the head of Homeland Security.
Rahm Emanuel and the devil could only tell us.
Yeah, there you go. Greg Palast. You can read all about it over gregpalast.com, gregpalast.com. Greg, great work. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Tom.
Good having you on.